everybody. I'm back with a new episode. Not an episode where I'm actually doing a whole lot, but I'm going to tell you about what I'm going to do next. So, I have a new project, which involves a new dress, which involves new research for a new century. So, typically, I conduct my living history research in the era of the Renaissance. So, I consider the Renaissance about 1350, 1400 to 1600 for my purposes for the organization that I'm a part of. And usually I stick to the Italian peninsula, specifically the northern Italian peninsula. And for this project, I'm going to be jumping not only time periods, but also a location. So for me, that's a little bit unnerving because I don't know a lot about this new time period. Of course, I could just make a dress, right? I could get a pattern and make a dress, but I guess my mindset is more about living history. So I want to understand why they wore the dress they wore. I want to understand how it was layered, what foundation garments they would have worn, what would it have been made of. I also want to understand how they thought and how they lived. So when they wake up in the morning, what do they do first? So if you think about your life right now, when you wake up in the morning, I usually check my phone to see what time it is. And then inevitably I get dragged into checking messages because I see little red dots on my screen to let me know there's an email or a message. That's before I get out of bed. And then when I get out of bed, I usually am awaking while it's light outside. So I don't have to turn on the light. But if I did, I would just flip a light switch. I would go into the bathroom, I'd turn on the water, I'd brush my teeth, I'd use the toilet, I'd wash my face, etc. So how did they do all of that? When they woke up, how did it happen? Did someone come and wake them up? Did they wake up themselves? Did they have to light a candle, light a fire? Where did they get their water from, etc.? So that's the mindset I'm coming from. As I'm not just interested in their clothes, I'm interested in who they were. So first, I have to figure out what this time period is called. And I've heard a lot of terms. Late Georgian, Regency, Directoire, Impero in Italy. So I was like, well, which one is right and which one am I going to use? So I did a little research. And what I found was in England, the Georgian era is from about 1714 to 1830, 1837. And it was called that because the Hanoverian kings, George I, George the First, George the Second, George the Third, and George the Fourth ruled during that time. So that's easy. Georgian era, the era of the King Georges. But that includes the Regency era, which was the time when the man who was to become King George the Fourth was regent when his father displayed symptoms of insanity. And that was from 1811 to 1820. And that's a little bit further than I want to go. I kind of want to stay in the 1790s. So I was like, well, late Georgian would be a good way to describe that. But then I thought, well, what do they call it other places? Because apparently these terms all either mean something now or meant something then, depending on where you were. So if you were in France or in England or in Italy or in America, you would have called this era something different. And then now we look back and call those eras something different. So my next step was to figure out what they called it in Northern Italy because I didn't know if I was going to recreate some dresses I found in paintings from Italy. So in Milan and Venice and Ferrara, I looked up eras on Wikipedia from Italy. That's wikipedia.it. And I found out that during the time of 1792 to 1802, they were called the Repubblica Cisalpina. Which means the Republic of Cisalpine area. And that was just like the northern city-states, right? They also were called from about 1802 to 1804, Repubblica d'Italia. And then after that, they were called Regno d'Italia, which, well, not Regno d'Italia. And that was from 1804 to 1814 under Napoleon, which now they look back and call that Impero, Impero Uno, or first French Empire. And then on top of all of those terms, I found another term. People call it directoire, So I looked that up, and apparently Directoire is a style from a period in fashion and decorative arts that was concurrent with post-revolution French directory rule, right? So that's 1795 to 1799. And this style was influenced by the classical Italians, right? The Romans, even before that, the Etruscans, also Louis the 16th. So with all of these terms, I was like, what about New Orleans? What if because I found some miniatures from New Orleans during that time period, and I thought, well, maybe I would focus on those women and what they wore. And so in New Orleans at that time, 1792 to 1804, it was actually under the Spanish colonial rule. So they called it Periodo Colonial. And that just added another layer of like, I don't want to even go there because that's 4 languages right now, right? So I'm going to stick to calling it Directoire. Because my most favorite plates and paintings are from 1795 to 1799. And I think the French name for it kind of gives you the feel, and I think the French name for it is best. If I do choose to recreate some New Orleans paintings or miniatures, then Directoire would be perfectly acceptable because there's a French connection there. And even if I chose to do the Italian one that I found, Direttorio would be what they called it. And so Directoire, or under the French directory, would be the best term for me to be as specific as I can with the dress and with my research. So Directoire, 1795, 1799, right? So moving on, I did all of this research online, and I also looked in a couple of books that I have. So I've gotten a couple of books to help me look into that period, into what they wore. And the first one is the American Duchess book. So 18th century dressmaking. It does talk about hand sewing Georgian gowns and how to wear them with accessories and underpinnings. So this is a really good book. I like that it has detailed instructions to make your own patterns, although I am not that advanced yet. I like the information they have in here. Also, their blog is really great because they've taken a deeper dive into some of these terms and some of the dresses that were worn during the time period that I am focusing on. So I also have this book, right? This is what I used when I was researching late medieval, early Renaissance dresses and what kind of accessories would go with them. So I want to find something like this for my new time period. I just don't know where to look yet. I want to look at the actual museum pieces that they would have excavated or, just had in their collections from 1795 to 1799. So those are the 2 books I have right now. I also have a couple of scans from another book called Costume and Detail, 1730 to 1930 by Nancy Bradfield. And the sketches in that book are really detailed, and I like the explanation of some of the layers. So that's where I'm starting. If you have any suggestions on other books that I should look into, please let me know in the comments below. So now we're going to talk silhouette. What did the overall silhouette look like? And what I found was at the end of the 18th century, fashion transitioned. So this was sparked by the French Revolution and the subsequent embrace of like the classical world. I talked about Rome a few moments ago. And so this neoclassical period in fashion began. Simplicity was the goal. Elaborate trimmings and expensive fabrics were out. Gowns followed after the famous chemise à la reine that was worn by Marie Antoinette in the 1780s. So less trimming. These dresses were made of fine cotton muslin that was imported from England instead of silk, and they wore classically inspired headwear as well. I found a few blogs that helped me that helped direct me to paintings from the time period. And I saved images of all those paintings so I could keep in mind what silhouette I'm going for. So it's not going to be as structured as maybe the 1770s and early 1780s. It's going to be a little bit more free flowing. And so even the stays and the underpinnings that I would wear would be different from those. And this silhouette was fashionable across Europe, even into Scandinavia and into the Americas. I have a couple of pictures to show you, pictures of paintings or pictures of extant gowns. So we have this white chemise dress of nettle cloth called nettle cloth. I'm not sure exactly what that means yet, but I will find out. This is from a museum in Copenhagen. This is from 1797. And so another example of the silhouette that I'll be going for is the 1799 example from the Met Museum. This is a robe en chemise. Now, that was the name of this transitional dress in period. It translates to chemise gown in English. So this chemise gown was basically made of soft, sheer cotton or linen. And underneath it was a petticoat. Underneath that was stays, and underneath that was a shift against your skin. The robe en chemise or chemise gown is a slightly more fitted version of the chemise à la reine. It's less voluminous, it's gathered in the front. The sleeves are maybe 3/4 length or long, and if they're long, they're buttoned at the wrist. And cotton muslin was the fabric of choice. I love this other portrait. It's 1795 by Jacques-Louis David. It's a portrait of Émilie Cerizet. And I love the dress, and I love the blue accent sash. And so eventually I will get to that. And again, the foundations for this really sheer muslin style robe en chemise or chemise gown are, in order of layering on the body, you'd have a shift, then you'd have stays, then you'd have a petticoat, and then you would have the dress. And then over that, you could have a chemisette, you would have a sash, you would have headgear, you would have your accessories, your fan or your muff or your shawl. So basically the next step is to see what the finished products look like. So I know exactly what I'm shooting for, overall. And this other photo from a Met Museum display with the robe en chemise that I showed you earlier gives you an idea of what it would look like on a lady who's going out for an evening with a cotton dress and a silk overdress. So the patterns that I have so far are, first, this one. This is a woman shift from 1790 to 1820. It's just a basic shift. I'm gonna make this of linen, right? I'm probably gonna make it sleeveless so that I don't have any issue with the sleeve of the chemise and the sleeve of the dress I'm gonna make fighting with each other. So I bought stays from Redthreaded. I purchased the 1790s transitional stays. So like I said earlier, this would have been less rigid and forming than the earlier Georgian stays, but they still provided some lift, just softer. So the shift I've already purchased. The next layer will be the petticoat. And I got this pattern from Laughing Moon. It's number 132. And I like it, except that it has buttons in the back. So if I'm getting dressed by myself, I'm not sure how I would accomplish that. So I might, instead of making it like full at the top, just have two straps coming down to the petticoat skirt. But also, some of the sheer muslin dresses had a colored petticoat underneath, which would have needed to be kind of full like this. So I'll make some decisions about what I want to do with just the petticoat. And if I ever want to make like a colored underdress, then I would be able to do that from this pattern. I hope you can see it with the So, also I mentioned chemisette. So I found in the American Duchess book, they talk about the chemisette. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I need a pattern, right? I'm a beginner. I can't look at a book with a pattern idea that's this big and like figure it out. So I got this from Laughing Moon as well. And it has several different chemisettes on it. I will probably go with the first one here. and let it really, and do the ruffle. Probably go with the first one here. Okay, and then lastly, which I will get to in order of the way I'm showing you, is how I'm going to sew them. So I am not going to attempt this first. This will be the final step in it. I will be making the robe en chemise from Laughing Moon. So I chose Laughing Moon for a couple of reasons. Let me just open up the pattern, show you what's inside. So I chose Laughing Moon for a reason. As a beginner and as someone who's really interested in not just the dressing up part, but also the historical part, their patterns come with information that is really helpful to me. So it comes with a booklet, right? You get a whole booklet. And in the booklet are, as you can see, the contents here. So it not only comes with the pattern, it also comes with historical notes. And it comes with how to determine the size to cut. It comes with the pattern pieces and how to lay them out on the actual fabric. I mean, it's pretty detailed and it's step by step. So because I don't have a sewing partner and because we are living in pandemic times, I will be doing this probably by myself or over Zoom with someone else. So this is going to help me be a little more self-sufficient. So aside from the booklet you also get the pattern pieces, right? And more pattern pieces, more pattern pieces. Wow, there's a lot of pattern pieces in here. Yeah. So when I get to that step, I will open up all of that, but I'm not going to overwhelm myself right now because I've never sewn a dress from a pattern. I've never sewn a complete dress really by myself, so beginner. All right. So the next part and the next step that I took was to also buy my fabric. So I have the linen from fabricstore.com. I got their bleached linen 3.5 ounce for the shift or chemise and the petticoat. So it's the IL020. And I got 10 yards of that to start. And then for the dress, one of the recommendations for the type of fabric you can get is Swiss dot. So I got some of that from Joann's. It was available. So my next step will be to wash and iron these and then start looking at the pattern for the shift and the petticoat and the chemisette. Wish me luck. And then while I'm doing that, when I take breaks from actual sewing or cutting out or preparation and ironing, I really want to dive into who were they? How did they see the world? What were their routines? What hygiene and cosmetic practices did they have? And how do they differ from mine? So more videos on those questions and the answers next. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe out there and be excellent to each other.